Hi, my name's Fiona Cope and this is my student ID. Today I'll be discussing GMO foods. So the purpose of this presentation is firstly to look at the use of GM foods and its benefits to the long-term well-being of the global population. I will be discussing critically the argument for and against the use of GM products, in particular the moral issues of playing God. Then I will focus on the theoretical consequences that could result if we don't embrace genetically modified foods. And finally, I will argue why we need to embrace genetically modified products. So around 10,000 years ago, people shifted from a hunter-gatherer society to staying in one place and working the land. As a consequence of this, these new farmers attempted to produce enough foods to feed the communities they'd settled, which is what has led to the selected breeding of crops and animals, and now to the technologically advanced movement in genetic modification development. Since roughly 1996, we have been making, growing, and consuming GM products. So what are genetically modified products? According to the Director of Agriculture Biotechnology Council of Australia, or the ABCA, genetic modification is created when scientists deliberately choose specific genes that enhance or delete particular characteristics, depending on whether are considered desirable or not, in the most targeted and undestructive way possible. The benefits of GM crops are many. They grow bigger and faster than regular crops, which is essential for our growing population and for a world which ultimately has finite resources. GMOs have increased productivity for the farming industry. According to the ABCA, GM crops have reduced pesticide use by 37%, increased crop yields by 22%, and have increased farmer profits by 68%. Another way it is beneficial is it improves the health of the poorer population of people living in the developing world who have no access to the appropriate resources and consequently find themselves deficient in vitamins and minerals. Such a product is that of golden rice, which is a variety of rice engineered to produce provitamin A that to help combat vitamin A deficiency, which can lead to defects in the eyes and ultimately lead to blindness. So despite the obvious benefits that can be gained from genetically modified technology, the fact that there are great concerns as to whether enough consideration is being given to the possible moral and ethical issues of playing God. It is one thing to improve crops by crop rotation or intentional crossbreeding, but it is another thing to use scientific and seemingly unnatural methods to make consumable products. To dive into a plant's DNA and alter it is considered by many to be taking it one step too far. By doing so, many people of faith feel it's acting in defiance of God's will. Understandably, we don't know the impact of consuming GM foods for an extended period of time. But if we don't invest in GM crops, then theoretically the consequences may be irreversible. The world is already finding itself under massive strain to provide water, energy, and food for the current population. And by 2050, it is likely that the Earth's population will reach 9 billion. Finding food for such numbers will not be easy. Without these new technologies, future generations will starve. These factors alone should compel nations to invest in these mechanisms, and even if scientists are playing God, we can't afford to not invest our world's future into these technologies. No matter the view on genetically modified organisms, we will eventually depend on them, and for good reason. Although we don't know the long-term effects of consuming genetically modified crops, we have no choice but to invest time, money, and energy into GM foods for the well-being of our global population. In conclusion, GM foods are the next step in the natural evolution of food production. As I have already stated, it is likely that if we don't follow this path and population growth continues as its current level, death through starvation and illness is going to rise dramatically. Further, people have always altered the environment to suit their needs. The difference now is that we are significantly speeding up the process of food growth by interfering with plants at a molecular level. And although this is seen by many as entering God's domain, it is essential that we do not let these fears interfere with scientific advancement. The numbers do not lie. If we do not investigate every avenue to us, then the future of human race will be very bleak indeed.